Hey guys, my name is Bandos, this is Breakfast Bando, and I've decided to leap with both feet into my first bout of internet drama. Oh, I am so looking forward to this. So, those of you who are in the Warhammer YouTube sphere may have seen a video recently by a gentleman who goes by MidWinter Minis, and it's I don't want to be the bad guys, basically. And it's him basically moaning about why he doesn't play historical war games because he doesn't want to play as the bad guys from WW2. Which I won't be saying their name because YouTube really hates the word even if you're discussing it in any sort of context. So, it's a painting video where they paint up a Sherman and a Panzer IV or Panzer III, and they moan about people playing war games. And I would just like to go back at this and rebut, counter this video. Now, I'm not going to use clips from his video for several reasons. The first being I'm far too retarded to be able to figure out how to do it properly. And the second is I'd rather you went and watched his video and made your own opinions. Now, at one point he talks about how historical war games are not popular because people don't want to play as the Yahtzees. Well, that can't be further from the truth. Because historical war games have existed much longer than fictional war games. And as someone who basically left Warhammer around 5th or 6th edition and played nothing but Second World War historical war games, I can tell you that the Hugo Boss edition army are the most popular army out there. In fact, it got to a point where people were getting really annoyed because all they were doing was playing against the Hermann Goerings, and they wanted to play against someone else. It got to a point where Bolt Action kind of had to nerf their rules and buff the other armies around them so more people would play other armies. Now, there are several insinuations in this video that he makes that people who play these armies, the people who like to play these armies, somehow, somewhere share the beliefs and the tenets of the belief system that these guys held. And that is total bullshit. Yes, there are going to be some people out there who are that way inclined. It's very easy to find them in the community, and they get ostracised from the community very, very quickly. There was a big issue a couple of years back in a tournament in Spain, in a Warhammer tournament, where a completely out in the open fascist was at the tournament. Now, bit of a tangent here. Funny thing about this story is, in Spain, your political views are protected by law. He could not be kicked out of the venue because he was a fascist. He didn't hurt anybody, he wasn't rude to anybody, and by law, they were not allowed to remove him from the premises. They couldn't eject him from the tournament. Okay, fair dues. Actually, I think that's a fairly sensible rule to have. Treat everyone equally. He has the right to be that stupid idiot, and that's fine. Everyone refused to play him. That's perfect. He doesn't get to play anybody, he doesn't get to get any games of Warhammer, but he doesn't just get thrown out on some arbitrary, we don't like your politics. That's the perfect system, in my opinion. The downside was that the tournament organisers didn't think of it this way, because the way they'd written their rules was, if someone refuses to play you, it counts as your victory. So, on a technicality, he ended up winning every single one of his games. Which is why we ended up with that Warhammer is for everybody little spiel from Games Workshop a couple of years back. Now, I play Germans in Bolt Action. In fact, my German army was the first army I painted to completion. And by that I mean they were fully based, everything was varnished, and the army was done. I built and painted everything. Before that, I had always, for 20 years or whatever the hell it was, my armies had always been in a constant state of progression. I'd be painting them, I'd be adding stuff, I'd be gaming with unpainted models, and I'd end up with, a scheme that I didn't like anymore, so I'd strip them and start again. Well, my Afrika Korps army was the first army that I painted all the way through. And I'm just going to show them off to you guys. So this is the vehicles that I've got for my Afrika Korps army. Now, they're not accurate. This isn't some super, TISM historically accurate force. This is the German army in the desert. And a lot of these miniatures are made by a company called Perry, or Perry Miniatures. Now, Perry Miniatures will be familiar to some of you, especially those of you who played Warhammer Fantasy, because they actually were the guys that sculpted a lot of the old Empire and Bretonnians and all the other sort of Warhammer Fantasy stuff. And the rest of it is usually made by a company called Warlord Games. This is a Perry miniature. This Kubelwagen is Perry, and they're slightly smaller because they're true 1/56 scale, which means they're not heroic, so the hands aren't huge, the heads aren't huge. And it's not my best painting. You can see here the chipping on this Panzer II. It doesn't look great. I used a masking fluid that I wasn't particularly fond of. It's horrible sort of blue putty stuff. And you can see this sodding great big tiger here. Now, he's got no decals, he's got no markings, the chipping doesn't look great. He's also an absolutely stonkingly solid piece of resin. Like, he makes most Forge World models feel light. Now, I could go back and repaint this, I'm not going to. If I was to do this again, I'd start from scratch. I have taken this army out and I've played with it several times. And at no point have I been accused of, or even considered myself, in relation to this political entity, the National Socialist Workers' Party. These are just models. They're toys. And I think the reason that so many people in the historical wargaming environment collect armies like this is because there is that romanticisation of war. There is that romanticisation of the enemy, the other. There is a reason that people dress up as stormtroopers. There's a reason that people, collect things like German memorabilia. There's a reason that people, dress up as the military for countries that are not theirs. Go and have a look at like cosplay and historical, like living history in Japan. They're not running around as Japanese soldiers. They're dressed as GIs. They're dressed as the Germans. They're dressed as the Brits, because that's something different. You can see here my painting skills are obviously improved over the years. This is actually before I had an airbrush as well, so this is all painted by hand. And this is one of my favourite miniatures. This is my senior officer, the leader of the army, with his German Shepherd, who I'm sure would have absolutely adored the weather around Tunisia. I've got a mixture of models here. These guys are from Black Tree Design or Artisan, I believe, and they are metal. They're all either metal or plastic models. Some objective markers, just made over with some leftover plastic bits, and you can see here how small the Perry Miniatures Germans are. And actually, here's the comparison compared to another one of the Artisan ones. Here's a comparison to one of my more recent models, a 30k Night Lord. So you can see just how different they are. Now, actually, this is correct scale. That is how they should look, because humans in the 41st millennium often are actually not at the correct scale for 1/56 scale. So that's actually, you don't need to upscale your Space Marines. We should be downscaling our Imperial Guard. Bit of a tangent. Now, these aren't the only army I've got. Just before anyone accuses me of being, a Yahtzee fanboy. Here's part of my US Marines, which is the 2nd Marines at the Battle of Saipan, which was the only black regiment that saw combat. My US Army in Italy is the 92nd Regiment of the US Army, which were known as the Buffalo Soldiers, because they have some interesting history, and they're different. You don't see many people doing these regiments. Again, these are peri-miniatures, so they're again quite small. And again, my painting on these models is not as great because they are a smaller scale than Games Workshop, so I want to get over that. This is the second Marines, my Sherman, Noisette, named after a popular African-American singer at the time. He's got a little captured katana on the on the turret. But you want to talk about the bad guys? I also play as the guys that killed 100 million people in the 20th and 21st century. So, it's not just the Yahtzees we've got to worry about. There's a whole different faction that never gets people complaining about it. You never hear people asking and going, hey, why have you painted up your gene stealers as a communist revolution? The communist revolutions which have killed 10 times more people than the Nazis. Those guys. Love these tanks, by the way. And this is the thing. I am capable of separating the historical fact from the wargaming fiction. That's a Rubicon T26. It's a lovely kit, comes with hundreds of bits. This was all done with hairspray chipping, paint the tank green, varnish it, and then I put down a coat of hairspray, and then I gave it a nice coat of white. And then you use a wet brush and you can pull the hairspray off. And last of all, just a quick Hetzer in a nice little spring camo pattern that I found in a book once. But what am I going over here? Well, it's wargaming. The key word here is war. In every war, every battle, every conflict, there are two sides. And from both points of view, the other guy is the bad guy. Now you could be a French nobleman, and the guy with the bow, the Englishman, is the bad guy. You could be the Roman, and the hairy crowd running towards you, the savages, are the bad guy. You could be a Lancaster, and the Yorkist over there is the bad guy. I could be a normal human being, and the furries in the convention that I've just locked the doors to are the bad guys. What I'm getting at is that in every single image here on this standard Google search of the word, or of the term wargame, shows two sides. Good guys and bad guys, depending on the point of view. Now, we don't have to share the politics of the factions we're playing. We just simply play a game. We could play chess, where we have the white pieces and the black pieces. And even nowadays, people complain about the fact that those two colours have been chosen for chess. But they're just two colours. If we changed it to pink and green, someone would probably find a problem with it. We would not have a hobby if we did not have simulated conflict. I play video games as well. I play Escape from Tarkov, where you have Western PMCs versus Russian PMCs, and we go into an area and we kill each other. Now, you'd probably think, oh, the Russians, they're the bad guys, because modern politics tells us today, in our current situation, that Russia is evil and bad and must be the bad guys. Well, the storyline of the game actually is that it's the Europeans who are the bad guys, because they were the ones conducting illegal military experiments on people. And the Russians were the ones that came in there to stop them. But that's a certain point of view, and as Obi-Wan Kenobi says, a lot of things are true from a certain point of view. So, we have to learn as a community to separate fact from fiction. If you have a problem with a wargame because of the factions that are, shown in there, maybe wargaming isn't the hobby for you. Maybe, you should pick up a different hobby. Maybe you should look at knitting. But even in fantasy situations, let's look at, Warhammer. Oh, I'm going to play the High Elves. Okay, great, you're playing the High Elves. Are they the good guys? Because they brutally murder people who come to their island without permission. You're going to play the vampires? The guys that literally eat people? They drink the blood out of people, they kidnap women and children to feed on, they terrorise local populations. How about the orcs? The orcs who are all funny and loud and green, who rape, pillage, destroy, burn, disembowel, dismember, and destroy. You talk about Warhammer and how, like, there's no good factions in there. Well, you've got one faction that literally wants to bring hell into reality, and then you have another faction that is doing absolutely everything it can to make sure that its species survives, and, has got to live in a society where every day is absolutely brutally, disgustingly horrible, but that is the requirement, because otherwise some eldritch unknown horror could appear and just murder everyone. Good guys, bad guys, from a certain point of view. If you do not like a certain faction in a wargame, don't play them. In Bolt Action, there are 12, I think, different factions. You have all of the allies to play from. You've got Great Britain, the Soviet Union, United States of America. You have got Poland, who also I have an army for. My favourite army is Poland. Who else have we got in here? Belgium, Belgium, France, Australia, and China on the Allies. And then you have Japan, Italy, Japan, Italy, Germany, Finland, Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania. Those are all factions who you could play as. If you don't like the idea of playing as Nazi Germany, then don't. Collect a Romanian army, or a Bulgarian army, or a Hungarian army. Funny fact, most of the conflicts that are attributed to the Germans were actually done by the Hungarians, and the Bulgarians, and the Romanians. All of the Stalingrad stuff was mostly Hungary. Go collect a Polish army. Poland, you've got two brilliant armies of Poland in Bolt Action. You've got the early war with cavalry and tiny little tanks. But you've got the late war where they had things like paratroopers and mostly British equipment. Play as the USA. Sure, you'd absolutely love that. You seem like the sort of person that would love America, I'm sure. Do a Soviet naval brigade and buy yourself an absolutely huge armoured patrol boat. It's as big as my forearm and I still haven't finished mine. I will eventually. But again, if you don't like it, go and play something different. Play something like Pike and Shot. Play the English Civil War where you can be a Roundhead or a Cavalier. One of them's the bad guys, from a certain point of view. Go and play, I don't know, Black Powder, the Napoleonic Wars. Do you want to play as, what were they called? I can't remember. Coalition. Do you want to play as the Coalition or the French Empire? One of those is the bad guy, from a certain point of view. It's war. We are playing a game, we have made a game of war, which is not a nice thing. So you have to separate these things. And if you can't do that, again, that is a problem that you have to deal with. Now that's got a little ranty, and I didn't want to get particularly ranty over this, but I don't like people who poke at other people for a faction they play in a serious tone. I have never accused someone who plays as the Germans in this game of being that way politically inclined, because I know they're not. And I think we call people that word far too often nowadays. And it's losing its losing its importance, it's losing its power and its meaning. So stop calling people that word. Now lastly, I know you dirty deleted the comment I put on your video, so I'm going to throw it up here because the internet never forgets. Alright, my name is Bando, this is Brexit Bando, I'll have another video up tomorrow. Have a great day guys, bye.